And with our first story, this is probably one of the most unbelievable news of the week. Or probably, outside of the pandemic of course, this is probably one of the most unexpected movie news of the year. You'd think it wouldn't happen. You'd think it would never exist. And yet, here we go. It looks like it's gonna happen. Well, brace yourselves for next year, everybody, because it looks like we are about to enter into the Snyder Cut. Yes, folks, the Zack Snyder Cut of Justice League is officially going to be happening. HBO Max has officially made that announcement that for next year, in 2021, they are going to release a special edition of the 2017 movie Justice League that will be the entire original director's cut from Zack Snyder. And pretty much because it's going to be a whole year until it's going to be released, right now Zack Snyder is going to be working hard in order to create his original version of the movie. Now, if you guys don't know what has happened, if you don't necessarily know the little history of what has happened with the 2017 Justice League movie, well, brace yourselves because this is actually quite a fascinating story. Now, it actually all began during 2016. It was in the middle of 2016, I believe, where everybody was working on this Justice League movie. Production seems to be going fine. But then suddenly there was a serious tragedy that occurred where the daughter of Zack Snyder, who is intended to be the director of the whole movie, has unfortunately committed suicide. And this put up some major grief for Zack Snyder, where it left him with no choice but to stop directing altogether. He had to quit in order to have some moment of grief for his daughter's passing. And thus, he gave the directing duties onto the hands of Joss Whedon, which he has some great experience with superhero movies before, especially for a movie like this, considering that he did work on Avengers for Marvel. So, he pretty much took the position to finish up what Zack Snyder left off, which really wasn't a whole lot at that point. They had to do some, just a little bit of edits, just to do some music, maybe a little bit of reshoots, but the main thing was essentially to do post-production work. That was the main thing that Joss Whedon had to go and take care of while Zack Snyder was out grieving. But when the movie did come out on November of 2017, it didn't necessarily work out well for anyone. Not for the movie, not for Warner Brothers, and not for the universe that this is all set in, the DC Extended Universe, or DCEU. The critics and audiences felt very mixed about the movie itself and how it went, because a lot of people really did notice that the difference between the vision of Zack Snyder and the vision of Joss Whedon is pretty much night and day, and it feels like it's just two different styles constantly clashing on one another. It may not have necessarily been the worst superhero movie out there, but it wasn't well prepared. It wasn't one that was well crafted in order to have this unified version to tell this unified vision to tell this story of Justice League. And if it wasn't bad enough that the reception was pretty much mixed to a little bit negative, the box office, however, is what really paid the price for this one. What ended up happening was that it did receive some money at the box office. It made over $650 million, which is actually pretty good for a movie, of course. But the real problem is the fact that Justice League was a stupidly expensive movie. And when I say stupidly expensive, I mean that it has a budget of $300 million. $300 million. That is almost unheard of for a movie. Now, it has happened before, but going up to that budget, it is absolutely ridiculous. And thus, Warner Brothers ultimately paid the price for it, where the movie ended up becoming a box office bomb and lost $60 million. Now, with that said, that's just the main story of what happened to the movie during its initial release and during the production. What about the stuff that happened afterwards? Why is it that this movie in particular felt so relevant even after it came out, even after it became a box office bomb and stuff? Well, that story is actually very unusual, because what happened is that there are those super fans that absolutely adore the DCEU. They think that the DC Extended Universe is the best thing to happen to movies since the camera was invented. And from there, of course, they were also a bit disappointed with Justice League as well. But they believe that the biggest problem with the feature is because of the clashing visions that are in the film. Because you got a mix of Zack Snyder's vision and Joss Whedon's vision. And they felt like if it weren't for Zack Snyder's daughter's suicide, then they would have had the Justice League that they wanted for so long. And thus, for 2.5 years, ever since the movie's release, fans have been making this protest that is infamously referred to as #ReleaseTheSnyderCut, where they believe that there is a version within the lot of Warner Brothers, that there is this version of the 2017 Justice League movie that is completely and 100% just Zack Snyder's version. And they have pleaded and demanded for that director's cut to go and happen. And ever since then, like, they still kept on trying, and they still kept on rallying up for all that time. Like, you'd think that it would have been just like a stupid little moan of protest and people would have moved on. No, they did not give up. They still kept on bringing it up even long after Justice League was ever relevant, and people were pretty much making fun of it because, well, let's be honest, it really is the stupidest meme, well, not the stupidest meme, but the stupidest movie-related hashtag ever created for cinema history. And that's why we've seen so many parodies of Release the Snyder Cut, where one famous example is Release the Butthole Cut, where apparently there was a version of the 2019 movie Cats where apparently the visual effects ended up accidentally creating buttholes for the characters. So people demanded that there should be a version of Cats where somehow they coincidentally have buttholes. Or another example that I saw, and this was something that I've recently seen with Pan Pizza's videos, he created a little funny parody called #Release the Seth Green Cut, where Disney should release a version of Mars Needs Moms that the main character is entirely Seth Green, just like it was originally planned. So a lot of people were pretty much making fun of it. But now it seems like the joke has become all too real at this point. And now Warner Brothers is taking it so seriously that now they're actually going to do it. They're actually going to go and make a Snyder Cut. Now, the big question is at this point right now is, now what? Okay, so the Snyder Cut is going to be real. What are they going to do about it? All we know so far is that they would go and release it in 2021. Well, apparently in this article of The Hollywood Reporter, they did reveal that there's going to be a little bit of a game plan with what they want to do. And I'll take a bit of a big article here. I'll take a big section of it to really get down into the details about what's happening. Okay, yeah, it's just right over here. So reading from the Hollywood Reporter, it states, it is currently unclear what form Snyder's Justice League will take. Whether it will be released as almost 4 hours director's cut or split into 6 chapters has yet to be decided. But the Snyders are now in the midst of reassembling much of their original post-production crew to score, cut, and add new and finish old visual effects. And yes, maybe bring back many of the actors to record additional dialogue. Also unclear is the cost of the endeavor. One source has pegged the effort in the $20 million range, although another source say that figure could be closer to $30 million. The parties involved have no comment. It will be Zack Snyder states, by the way, it will be an entirely new thing, and especially talking to those who have seen the released movie. A new experience apart from that movie. And even stating that Zack Snyder has since never even seen the completed version of Justice League. He hasn't seen the entire 2017 movie. And even went as far and say that you probably saw 1/4 of what I did. And so basically he's stating that among like all the 2 hours in there, probably 30 minutes of it is purely of what Zack Snyder intended. But that seems to be the big story right now, is that, yep, the Snyder Cut is real. Apparently they are gonna make it, and apparently it is gonna happen. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that it is real, because just like what many people have stated before, or when discussing about this argument, it's actually the case that both sides are actually correct. Where the fanboys who want the Snyder Cut, yes, they are right. Warner Brothers is indeed going to release the Snyder Cut. They are actually going to make that happen, and they will deliver it for them. But at the same time, the people who don't believe the Snyder Cut existed, they are correct as well, because technically it is true that it never actually existed. There wasn't an actual Snyder Cut that is left in the lot of Warner Brothers just waiting to be released, because right now, that's what Zack Snyder is doing. That's what he's currently trying to make. That's why it's going to take up to up to next year for him to go and release it, and why he's given an additional budget of like $20 to $30 million. That's the whole thing with that. So in terms of that argument, yes, both sides are pretty much correct in this case. But at the end of the day, it looks like next year we are going to have an actual Snyder Cut of Justice League. Now, the big question at this point, it's just, you look at this and you have to ask, why? Why is it that Warner Brothers is caving in to the fanboys and pretty much just giving them their little Snyder Cut? Like, why is this even happening in the first place? And I tried looking deep into it and seeing some of the things that are occurring and seeing some of the times that are happening of it. Honestly, I could think of 2 reasons at least to why Warner Brothers is doing it. Now, with those 2 reasons, there are also 2 reasons why it's obviously not the reason why Warner Brothers wants to do the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Like, number 1, it's not to capitalize on the movie. It's not really to go and capitalize on the Justice League because, as I've said before, it was a massive box office flop. It lost $60 million. Warner Brothers was way too ambitious, giving it way too much of a budget of $300 million. So it's not really a profitable movie to highly capitalize into. So that's the big thing from it. It's not really something that could really go and generate a lot of money for Warner Brothers. So obviously, it's not because of the movie itself. It's not because of the fact that it's a successful movie. And the second reason why they are not doing it, and this is going to be a bit of a controversial opinion, so brace yourselves, and I know that this might end up upsetting a few people, but the truth is, the DCEU is dead. Maybe Warner Brothers doesn't fully want to accept it, and I know a lot of fans don't want to accept it, but let's be honest, the DCEU was a complete disaster, and Warner Brothers wanted to do it mainly because they feel like they're obligated to, because they want to be the main competitors to Marvel. Marvel is doing extremely well with their cinematic universe and having a massive fan base and gathering huge amount of money in order to make those features. In fact, like right now, the highest grossing film of all time is officially Avengers Endgame. So, Warner Brothers feel like they have to be in a position where they have to have their own superhero cinematic universe to be in direct competition with Marvel, to have that illusion that there is still that whole DC versus Marvel thing going on. That's the big thing that they really want to do. However, the thing is with the DCEU, it's a flop. it's a failure. It just didn't really work out as well as they hope, not only critically, but also financially. I mean, there have been a few hits in the past where Warner Brothers did make money on some of their films, but critically, they've just been a joke. Like, regardless of what they could be, rather it be stuff like Man of Steel, technically the one that started it all, or stuff like like Suicide Squad, or especially Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. Right now, they've been looked back as a joke, where nowadays people just mock and ridicule the elements that are in that film. Rather it be pinning Jared Leto as the weakest cinematic Joker, or especially Dawn of Justice, which right now is pretty much one of the most laughable superhero movies, or the superhero movie that people make fun of the most. Like, it's pretty much becoming the new Batman and Robin, but in terms of the tone, it's like the complete opposite, where you got Batman and Robin, where that one is just way too silly and over the top, whereas Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, with that one, it's way too serious, it's way too dark and brooding, to the point that you just cannot take it seriously. Not to mention right now that everybody to this day are still making fun of the whole Martha thing. In fact, like, even Warner Brothers themselves are kind of making fun of it. Like, I remember, like, that whole moment has been completely satirized and completely made fun of for Teen Titans Go to the movies. Like, they really made it a big thing to go and make fun of that. And on top of that, even though I did state that when it comes to, when it actually does come to the DCEU, I did say that Warner Brothers is not fully giving up on the DCEU. They still want to try to make a few movies for it, but even at that, they are starting to let go of the DCEU and would rather want to make DC movies that are just standalone, that they want to make their own movies that don't necessarily have to have any form of a connection to the previous DC films. Like, they don't have to have a connection to stuff like Dawn of Justice or 2017 Justice League and stuff like that. We've already seen that happen with Joker, which is not the Jared Leto version, but a completely new take on it that is completely different than what the DCEU is trying to do. And, like, there's even reboots of, like, movies that they try to do, but they massively failed. Like, right now, there's a Suicide Squad reboot coming up, where even though Margot Robbie is reprising her role as Harley Quinn, it's a completely new version that James Gunn is going to be directing. And then there is also The Batman, in which it's going to be an entirely new version with an entirely new cast. Like, Ben Affleck is out of the picture. He is now replaced with Robert Pattinson, and they're going to do a new version of Batman. So even Warner Brothers, like, despite still want to try to do the DCEU a thing, like, they're stepping back and they realize it's just not working out. They might have made some money in the past, but they didn't get the critical reception that they wanted, and especially with the Justice League, which is supposed to be the big main movie, like the main course of the DCEU, that's supposed to be like the Avengers for DC. That one turned out to be a failure. It wasn't as critically well received, and it turned out to be a box office flop. So with that said, yeah, it's definitely not for the sake of, like, strengthening up the DCEU, because that thing is dead, rather if people want to accept it or not. So what is the reason? What is the reason why they would go and do it? Well, number one, it's obviously because of the fact of where it's going to be released. Not in theaters, but on HBO Max. And the thing is that essentially Warner Brothers' plan for this is that they want to trick the Snyder Cut fanboys into getting HBO Max. And not only getting HBO Max, but to keep it for a whole year, at least until the Snyder Cut would officially be released. That they want to do something to really hype up HBO Max, to really lure people into getting HBO Max. And they know that these Snyder Cut fanboys, they are desperate for it. They are ready to do anything to go and have the Snyder Cut, even if it means to catch the coronavirus and spread it onto their friends and family. If it means that they would go and get the Snyder Cut, they would be more than happy to go and do it. But in this case over here, okay, like, I know, like, some may say that it's too extreme of an example, but that's just a bit of a hyperbole to pretty much emphasize of how desperate these fanboys are just for a Snyder Cut or a director's cut of a failed movie. But the thing is that the point that I'm making is that they are willing to do literally anything. And if it means to go and get HBO Max and, like, keep it in for, like, a whole year, they would go and definitely do it. So it's obviously to go and trick them to get their money, to have them onto their platform, even if they wouldn't necessarily be interested in anything that HBO Max would have to offer, except for the upcoming Snyder Cut that would be out in 2021. And I can guarantee you, when it comes to the release of the Snyder Cut, if I could make a prediction, then I'm guessing that it would probably come out sometime, it would be more than a year. It's going to be either in the summer of 2021 or in the fall of 2021. That I can guarantee you, in order to maximize the profit that they can get from those Snyder Cut fanboys to lure them into HBO Max. Now, of course, this is just a theory. Now, I could be wrong on this one, but then again, the reason why I mention this is because it seems so highly suspicious of the fact that they would make this announcement in particular, but then again, like, they would do this announcement the week before the release of HBO Max. That, honestly, I find to be so fishy. That I find to be so suspicious about. That's one thing that I really want to emphasize, and why I feel like it really is to trick people into getting HBO Max. But if it's not for that, like, let's say I'm wrong on that theory, and if it's not for that, if it's not for tricking people into HBO Max, and if it's definitely not to go and strengthen the DCEU, and it's not to capitalize on the movie, then I think I know exactly what it is for. If there is one thing, it's because Warner Brothers has one message for the Snyder Cut fanboys.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
2.5 years. 2.5 years that the fanboys have been trying to desperately spread the message, to keep using the hashtag again and again and again. Keep saying, release the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut. Protesting as if it was one of the biggest things that they needed. Protesting as if their human rights are in danger. That they needed this because it's an essential piece of life. That for some reason, they cannot breathe, they cannot live unless they get the Snyder Cut. For them, it's food, water, shelter, and the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. They've been at it for so long that they cannot let go of it. That ultimately, just like I said, Warner Brothers caved in just so these people could end they could end that hashtag, to give them what they want so that they could finally be quiet about it, to have these fanboys stop pestering both Warner Brothers and Zack Snyder, so that they don't have to deal with these angry fanboys anymore. You'd think, like, normally these kinds of things would just be a trend. It would be a little fad that would come and go quickly. But no, they kept at it. They still kept on going for a Snyder Cut. That for some reason that Warner, somehow the reputation is at stake, and the only way that to save the DCEU is to have the Zack Snyder Cut. For some reason. Like, they have to kept on going. And just like I said before, it is the dumbest movie-related hashtag that has been created on social media, to the point that everybody was pretty much making fun of it. It just felt so annoying, and like, it long past the point where it was even funny to see angry fanboys demanding something that nobody really needed. That honestly, this is something that not even Warner Brothers nor Zack Snyder really needed this. And honestly, like, if I could make a comment on those fanboys that kept on protesting for the Snyder Cut for years, it's that honestly, they're like, it really shows that they are very disrespectful to Zack Snyder himself, and that they obviously don't seem to care about his needs, and they only care about their needs. Because honestly, it's very justifiable why the Justice League movie came out as it is. Yeah, it might have been a little bit of a disjointed mess, but there is a reason. Because his daughter, like, come on, his daughter died. Like, really, his daughter died, he needed some time of grieving, and all you care about is just to have a freaking Snyder Cut just because you want to have some extended cut of a movie that might not even work anyways? Just to have an extended cut that they say that might even go on for almost 4 hours, or could be like a 6-part miniseries? Like, really? Are you really that desperate and so selfish that you really need that? That you really want Zack Snyder to get out of his way, and instead of making new ideas, instead of making new projects, you just want him to go back and work on a movie that is not even going to be worth it anyways. Like, really, dude? Like, honestly, you know, it's kind of like, you know, a give or take kind of thing with this whole situation, with the whole Snyder Cut thing. It's like, on one hand, it's absolutely ridiculous that Warner Brothers is doing it, but then again, at least there is a bright side that at least this will end that hashtag. It will end people from saying release the Snyder Cut. And if I may put my opinion on this, how this movie is going to be, honestly, I don't know. There is a possibility it could turn out to be better, it could turn out to be good, and it could actually turn out to be one of the best superhero movies in recent years. I don't know, but to be very honest, with the way things are going with the DCEU and with the past movies that came out of that universe, honestly, I feel like this whole Snyder Cut thing, it's gonna be a disaster. In fact, it's going to be as disastrous as the DCEU itself. Because, like, it's gonna be a 4-hour movie. It's gonna, like, essentially, at least the running time, regardless of how they're gonna release it, it's gonna be like this entire this whole 4-hour feature. And for what? To have, like, complete, like, just so we can have Zack Snyder's vision of the DC universe. Because, oh yeah, that definitely worked last time with freaking Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. Like, honestly, I could definitely tell you that, yes, there will be those fanboys who already established their bias that this is going to be the greatest thing ever, that this is going to be the next big cinematic masterpiece in Citizen Kane and stuff like that. But I can guarantee you that the grand majority of people who are actually going to go watch it, they're going to watch it out of irony, or they're just going to watch it out of curiosity. Like, there will be those people who, you know, like, they'll just see for themselves how things are going to be with this version, that they are indifferent about Justice League, but have heard about it so much because of this hashtag that they'll see it. But I can guarantee you that most of these people are just going to watch it, and, like, they're just going to see it by how disastrous is going to be. Like, they're prepared to just go and make fun of it. And what this film it is, I wouldn't be surprised that what the Emoji Movie was in 2017 and what Cats was in 2019, the Snyder Cut of Justice League is going to be those kinds of films, but for 2021. And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there, or most people out there, that are pretty much armed and ready to go and ridicule it. But again, I could be wrong. Like, it could actually turn out, it could actually turn out to be good. It could turn out to be a movie that, like, maybe, like, it just needed to have just Zack Snyder's vision of it. But honestly, I am not excited about this at all. And especially with the fact that with Warner Brothers actually doing this, my problem with it really is the fact that it does send out the wrong message to audiences. It really does send out the wrong message to people, especially with the fact that like what Warner Brothers is trying to say is that as long as you keep on screaming and throw a temper tantrum like a triggered 2-year-old all the time, if you do that for like years on end, then eventually you'll get what you want. Like right now, I can pretty much say that these Snyder Cut fanboys, they're going to be psychologically damaged. They're going to be psychologically damaged to thinking that this is how life works. They're going to think that if they keep on pestering and whining and complaining on the internet for years on end, then somehow they'll magically go and get what they want. So it really does spread out the wrong message. So honestly, I feel like with this whole thing right over here, even though it's most likely a trick to get people into getting like a year subscription of HBO Max, this honestly, I feel like it's going to do more harm than it actually will do good. So I don't know how the future will hold. I don't know if this is probably something that could actually work out for Warner Brothers. Most likely, probably the one thing that Warner Brothers is definitely going to gain from this is going to be more subscriptions for HBO Max, of course. So they will gain something out of it. But I feel like this is going to be a case where this will cause a lot more harm than it will do good. So with that said, it is now time that I will go into the chat wall, and I would like to go and ask you all, what do you think about the Snyder Cut now being real? Are you guys excited to go and see it? Are you guys a little weary about it? I really want to know what you think, and especially if you have seen the 2017 Justice League movie, I would love to know what you think of it, and if the Snyder Cut could actually help out to make that movie better. I want to know your thoughts on that. Okay. Let's see now. Oh boy, this trend. Although I haven't watched Justice League, which is a good thing, nor I'm a superhero fan, this is straight up ridiculous and stupid when these fanboys go too far as much as protesters to the point where Warner Brothers decided to say enough is enough. At least here's hoping Warner Brothers can have a better success with the Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe than the DCEU. And you know what? I just need to go and say this because I know a lot of people out there love to make fun of like some really bad cinematic universes that don't work out, like the Dark Universe. But I will say it really shows how Warner Brothers is very desperate to have their own cinematic universe. Like, the thing is, at least when it comes to, the other companies doing cinematic universe outside of Disney, at least with Sony, they are starting off with something well. Like, they are starting off with something. It's like, at least with Venom, financially, it is off to a good start for their own cinematic universe, which, may I comment that, oh my god, what Sony did with their Spider-Man cinematic universe, it is, am I the only one that thought it's absolutely stupid and so narcissistic of Sony Pictures to give them that name of, like, what was it again? The Sony Pictures, cinematic, the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters. Like, come on, man, that's just dumb. Like, so anyways, back to what I was saying, like, you got Sony, like, they're off to a good start so far with Venom and their universe, and at least with Warner Brothers, like, they know when to stop. They could see that with the Dark Universe it's not working out well, they're pretty much stepping back. But with Warner Brothers, on the other hand, my god, they keep on trying and trying and trying, and it just does not work out. They try to force a cinematic universe, but it just doesn't work. The DCEU is a prominent example, and another one is technically Legos. Like, they were off to a great start with the Lego movie, but then suddenly, it just came crumbling down years later, where by the time Lego Movie 2 happened, it was a box office bomb, and the Lego group decided to bail out of Warner Brothers to go work with Universal. So honestly, and yeah, like, Scoob, I mean, it's, like, with the Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe, it's way too early to say, like, if it's gonna work out or if it's not. But, yeah, honestly, with Warner Brothers, they're way too desperate for a cinematic universe. Let's see now. Am I in Wonderland? First, they revealed that there was a butthole cut for Cats, and now there's a Snyder cut for Justice League. I'm sure that DC fans are very happy about this news, and I'm fine that they are, but seriously, what's next? Is there a boob cut for Zootopia, where all the female characters originally had boobs? Or the boomer cut of Michael Bay's Transformers movies, where they had more explosions than usual? Also, I like to think that the DCEU will be rebooted when the Flash movie comes out. You never know, man. You never know with their plans. Let's see. I'm surprised that Zack Snyder will finally make his version of Justice League after 2.5 years since the film's release. For me, I only saw the movie once back in 2017 on an IMAX and thought it was a good movie and haven't thought much of it since then. I'm not begging for the Snyder Cut because I didn't enjoy his work on Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, but since the Snyder Cut will be on HBO Max, I might check it out, but not in a rush. Okay, that's fair. That's definitely fair. Let's see, what else do we got? Though I do enjoy some Zack Snyder's movies, but Batman v Superman and Justice League were so mediocre, but I am happy that Snyder finally gets to finish the movie he wanted to make, even if I potentially don't think it would be that good. But those fanboys are so annoying and toxic that a part of me didn't want it to happen. Seriously, this isn't Heaven's Gate. Personally, I would want Bakshi's original Hey Good Lookin' and Lord and Miller's take on Solo. They never finished it, but mostly #release the butthole cut. And yeah, like, honestly, from there, like, what I've noticed on social media, because there is the Snyder Cut, there's also a lot of jealousy that has been expressed, where there's a lot of movies that have never been finished, or that the original vision never really happened, where those are pretty much still lost forever, but the Snyder Cut is still gonna be happening. Like, some examples, like this comment brought up, Bakshi's original Hey Good Lookin' that would have been a mix of live action and animation. Or another prominent example, The Thief and the Cobbler, with, to finish off the original vision of what Richard Williams wanted to do with The Thief and the Cobbler. Like, that's been something that animation fans have been demanding for years. But I guess not even the cartoon community was toxic enough to make that happen, to capture Warner Brothers' vision in order to go and do it. I guess the toxicity of the Snyder Cut and them annoying the living hell out of Warner Brothers and Snyder himself was apparently enough to get their attention and magically get them what they wanted. Again, it's a bad lesson that they're going to learn, and it's only going to increase the toxicity among the DCEU fan base. Again, it's going to do more harm than it is going to do good. Let's see now. This movement will only reinforce why corporations generally don't listen to fans in the first place. A dangerous precedent might lead to not just another flop like Cats 2019, but an offensive and crude mess like the Garbage Pail Kids movie. Let's see now. What else do we got? You know, I've spent most of my time thinking it didn't exist. I even thought it wasn't even filmed, but now I'm just completely baffled that it's real. I didn't like Justice League too well, but it's a passable superhero movie that serves its purpose well, and it's nice to see some closure on its end. However, now that we have the Snyder Cut, I gotta ask, can we please get the Ayer cut of Justice League? Do you mean Suicide Squad? I think you meant Suicide Squad. If you're talking about like David Ayer and his original take on Suicide Squad, you probably mean that. Anyways, I much prefer to see the butthole cut. $1 million idea right there. Okay, that's interesting. I'll go and read one more comment before we're going to jump into the next story. Let's see. Who would have one? Let's see. Okay. I'll go with here. Not even going to be into this like in general. I've seen this movie even with some of the other films, and it doesn't really make it enticing enough to make me want to be into this universe. It's not personal. It's nothing personal. Wonder Woman was great, but I just really hate the direction, especially of the portrayal of Batman is absolutely terrible. Ben Affleck really does look the part. His reasoning of becoming a mercenary and dialogue that's just ridiculously bad, that even Will Arnett was better. Yeah, and I mean, it's just like I said, it's not like Justice League itself, it's not the worst movie, but does it really, really need a director's cut? Absolutely.